Right now I'm standing in Northern Thailand at a Royal Enfield official test ride event. The rain has been coming down sideways all day, turning the mountain roads slick and the dirt tracks to grease. But despite the downpour, riding these new 450 platforms back to back today has been absolutely magic. And it got me thinking, why did Royal Enfield abandon 122 years of traditional thump? In 1901, Royal Enfield built their very first motorcycle in Redditch. For the next 122 years, every single production bike they made stayed true to the one core philosophy: simple, heavy-cased, air-cooled engines. It was slow-revving, low-stressed, and built to survive on oil, air, and sheer stubbornness. That low-end thump wasn't just an exhaust note, it was the brand's soul. Then came the Himalayan 450 and its liquid-cooled Sherpa engine. Royal Enfield threw a century and a quarter of design directly into the recycling bin. They gave us liquid cooling, ride-by-wire, double overhead cams and 4 valves per cylinder. On paper it's a modern marvel, but overnight the Royal Enfield camp split right down the middle. Purists called it heresy, modern riders called it salvation. Did Royal Enfield just gamble away the exact character that made us fall in love with these bikes in the pursuit of peak horsepower? Or are they playing a much bigger two-front game? Today we're going to look into the engineering, the ergonomics and the battle for the soul of Royal Enfield. So just to change of plan while we're waiting for bikes, I'm just going to have another go on the Guerrilla 450. A high-revving bike I found for Royal Enfield, but very pleasurable to ride. I can flat-foot it, which is nice. And it's got a power band right when you rev it up. To understand why the Sherpa exists, you first have to understand the thermal sealing of air-cooled engines. The outgoing LS411 motor was charming, rugged and ridiculously simple, but engineering-wise it was backed into a wall. Air is a poor heat conductor compared to a circulating liquid. To keep an air-cooled engine from cooking itself, engineers have to keep compression ratios low. The 411 sat at a relaxed 9.5 to 1 and run the air-fuel mixture rich to cool the cylinder head. When Euro 5 and strict global emission standards hit, running rich was no longer legal and running lean meant sky-high cylinder temperatures. You simply cannot build a 40 horsepower, high compression, emission compliant single cylinder engine relying solely on wind to cool it down. Now I know some of you in the comments are already typing, well, what about the BSA Gold Star 650? But look closer, BSA machined dummy cooling fins onto that cylinder block to fool your eyes, but underneath it's a liquid cooled engine with a radiator hidden right between the frame rails. Even BSA couldn't beat the physics of air cooling. Royal Enfield just decided to stop pretending and design a modern engine that looks like one. Okay, Himalayan 450. Totally different feel, totally different experience, totally different ergonomics actually, and not so planted as the Bear 650, and more unforgiving on the gear changes. Again, once you get used to it, it's okay. See these guys pass me a second. Yeah, it's very interesting to ride these bikes back to back actually, very interesting. Royal Enfield hit the physics wall. The option wasn't keep air cooling forever, it was either build a modern liquid cooled engine or stay stuck at 24 horsepower while the rest of the world and competition passed them by on the highway. Let's look under the casing because the mechanical changes go far deeper than just water jackets. First, the top end. The old engines used a simple single overhead cam layout that favoured low rev stability. The Sherpa uses a double overhead cam arrangement driving 4 valves. Compression jumped 11.5 to 1 and redline went from a lazy 6,500 RPM to a screaming 8,750 RPM. Second, the torque curve. The 411 gave you its peak torque down low at 4,000 RPM but choked high up. The Sherpa 450 still gives you a usable low end but its real wallop hits past the 5,500 RPM. On highway overtakes, it's a revolution. You're no longer sitting behind a semi-truck praying for a downhill gradient. Third, ride by wire. The mechanical cable is gone, replaced by an electronic throttle. It gives you riding modes and crisp metering, though purists will rightly ask what happens if an electronic sensor fails out in the wilderness. Now let's talk about something the spec sheets usually miss, how this engine layout changes the ergonomics. Because Royal Enfield went to liquid cooling, they no longer needed massive air cooling fins around the cylinder block. This allowed engineers to tilt the cylinder block forward by 45 degrees. By tilting the motor, two huge ergonomic advantages happen. Number one, low centre of gravity. The heavy cylinder head sits lower in the frame. Without the bulky air fins, the frame rails right behind the fuel tank and are slightly narrower. When you put your feet down, your legs go straight down instead of being pushed outward by a wide engine casing.
So you're either a fan of the water-cooled or you're not. And I tend to lean on the fact that I'm not a fan of the water-cooled engines, but I'm more of the fan of the Guerrilla. Oh, grip on the road also. I'm more a fan of the Guerrilla than I am the Himalayan. And I've heard rumours that they're going to make an off-road version of Guerrilla 450, and that would just be awesome if they do.
Royal Enfield knew exactly what they were doing when they launched the Sherpa. They knew they were going to alienate the traditional thumper crowd, and that's why they aren't abandoning the old guard. They're splitting the camp intentionally. And make no mistake about who holds the power here. Royal Enfield sells over 1 million motorcycles a year, selling more bikes in a single month than rivals like BSA sell in 3 full years. Royal Enfield isn't reacting out of fear, they are dictating the entire market. For the purists, like myself, who look at liquid-cooled 450 and said that's too complex, too rev-happy and too tall, Royal Enfield built a backup plan, the 440 platform. By punching out the classic air-cooled engine to a 443cc and keeping it a simple single overhead cam setup with low RPM tractor torque, they're giving traditionalists exactly what they asked for. Simplicity at low seat height and that familiar low-down chug without the weight or the fuss of liquid cooling. At the exact same time, for the high rev crowd who loved the 40 horsepower of the Sherpa engine but wanted a bike that was lower, lighter and punchier around town, Royal Enfield brought out the Guerrilla 450 platform. With a low 780mm seat height, 17-inch wheels and a stripped back chassis, it takes that high revving Sherpa motor and drops into an accessible, nimble street weapon. And some people nickname this bike the hooligan's bike.
That is just a complete nutcase. Yeah, and you could be a serious trouble on that bike.
It's called the hooligan's bike.
Royal Enfield didn't just build one replacement bike, they built two separate ecosystems, air-cooled, low-rev tractor sole on one side, liquid-cooled, high-rev, high-performance on the other. So where does that leave the soul of the machine? Let's listen. The signature low-frequency pulse is gone on the 450. The Sherpa sounds like a modern European single, mechanical, taut and eager to rev. In many ways it feels closer to a refined KTM than a traditional Indian thump machine. If your idea of a perfect Royal Enfield is defined by a pure heavy flywheel and an idling thump, the Sherpa will feel like a shock. But if your idea of Royal Enfield is about where the bike can actually take you, the math changes completely. Did Royal Enfield abandon 120 years of tradition? Hardware-wise, yes. But strategy-wise, they just executed a masterclass. They didn't force everyone into a liquid-cooled spec sheet. They built the Sherpa 450 for the rider who wants highway speeds, 40 horsepower and modern engineering to cross continents. And they kept that 440 air-cooled line alive for the rider who just wants simple tractor-like charm. The thump isn't dead, it just has two different heartbeats now. Which camp do you fall in? Are you sticking with the air-cooled 411 or 440 thumper, or is 40 horsepower in the Sherpa 450 worth trading a bit of tradition for? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it.
Even though it's a shitty rainy day, quite an awesome day at the same time.